Have you ever seen a movie so outrageous, so absurd, so full of slapstick comedy that you couldn't stop laughing? Yet beneath all the chaos, there was a heart-piercing truth about life. That's the magic of Stephen Chow. To millions across Asia and beyond, Chow isn't just a comedian or filmmaker. He is a phenomenon, a cultural force who reshaped modern comedy in ways few directors ever dreamed possible. From small beginnings in Hong Kong television to becoming one of the most influential comedy icons in cinema history, his story is packed with twists, risks, and surprises. Today, we're diving into the top 10 facts about Stephen Chow, facts that reveal the man behind the legend and explain why his films keep echoing across generations. Let's start with #10. #10. From poor kid to comedy king. When you watch a Stephen Chow movie filled with ridiculous gags, magical kung fu, and hilariously exaggerated characters, it's easy to think he must have grown up in privilege, surrounded by laughter. But nothing could be further from the truth. Chow was born in 1962 in Hong Kong, in a neighborhood where poverty was the daily reality. His family struggled financially, and his parents divorced when he was just 7. He was raised primarily by his mother, who had to stretch every dollar to feed her children. Imagine being a kid in a cramped apartment in 1960s Hong Kong, watching your mother do whatever it took to keep the family afloat. That was Chow's reality. Instead of toys or fancy outings, young Stephen Chow found entertainment in television. He adored kung fu shows and old black-and-white martial arts films. He spent hours mimicking fight scenes in front of the mirror, sometimes using a broomstick as a sword. His fascination wasn't just about violence or action, it was about storytelling. He absorbed the drama, the rhythm of action, and most importantly, the way emotions could be exaggerated to the point of absurdity. But here's where it gets interesting. He wasn't the class clown. In school, Chow was shy, quiet, almost invisible. Teachers and classmates often overlooked him. The irony is stunning. The man who would one day be crowned the king of comedy was a child who barely dared to speak in public. This makes his later success all the more extraordinary because he essentially built his confidence from nothing. When he finally decided he wanted to pursue acting, the odds were stacked against him. He auditioned for Hong Kong's TVB acting school, one of the few gateways into the entertainment industry, but he failed the first time. Many people would have quit, but Chow came back and tried again. On his second attempt, he made it in. This perseverance, born out of hardship, became a defining trait of his career. He was never the loudest or most connected, but he simply refused to give up. This poor, shy boy would eventually grow into a superstar, but he never forgot his roots. Many of his films, like Shaolin Soccer and Kung Fu Hustle, feature underdogs rising from poverty, using humor and grit to overcome impossible odds. Sound familiar? That's his own story hidden in plain sight. #9. The breakthrough sidekick who stole the show. Stephen Chow didn't start as a leading man. In fact, when he first entered television, he spent years playing background roles, forgettable characters who barely registered with audiences. His big break came in 1989 with a TV series called The Justice of Life. He wasn't the star, he played a supporting role as a goofy police cadet. But something incredible happened. Viewers couldn't take their eyes off him. Chow brought a unique brand of humor that Hong Kong audiences had never really seen before. He leaned into awkward pauses, exaggerated facial expressions, and offbeat timing. In a culture where comedy was usually delivered with sharp wit or slapstick violence, Chow introduced something subtler yet more outrageous, what later became known as Lei Tau humor. Roughly translated, it means nonsense comedy. Imagine a character saying something that makes absolutely no sense, but somehow it's so unexpected and deadpan that you can't help but laugh. That's Lei Tau, and Chow was its undisputed master. His performance in The Justice of Life turned him into an overnight sensation. Suddenly, the shy kid who once struggled to get noticed was a household name. Producers began offering him bigger roles, and soon he transitioned into movies. By the early 1990s, Stephen Chow was headlining box office hits like All for the Winner, a parody of gambling films. That movie made him a star not just in Hong Kong, but across Asia. But what's fascinating here isn't just that he became famous. It's how he redefined what comedy could be. Before Chow, most comedic actors in Hong Kong followed formulas rooted in Cantonese opera traditions or imported Western slapstick. Chow created a completely new rhythm. Absurdist, unpredictable, yet deeply relatable. His characters often came from the bottom of society, losers, beggars, wannabe heroes. By exaggerating their struggles and their dreams, he connected with audiences who saw themselves in his underdogs. Think about American parallels. In the U.S., comedians like Jim Carrey or Robin Williams gained fame for their manic energy and ability to bend reality with sheer performance. Chow was carving out a similar path in Asia, but with a uniquely local twist. He fused the absurd with martial arts, melodrama, and Cantonese wordplay. Watching him in those early roles was like discovering a new genre of comedy, something no one realized they'd been missing until he showed them. This breakthrough was more than luck. It was the culmination of years of quiet observation. Remember, Chow had spent his childhood watching kung fu dramas and mimicking them in the mirror. When he finally got the chance, he combined that childhood obsession with his natural comedic instincts. The result was explosive, and it permanently altered the trajectory of Hong Kong cinema. So when we look back at Fact-9, it's not just about a sidekick stealing the show. It's about how Stephen Chow introduced an entire comedic philosophy, Lei Tau, that still influences Asian comedy today. Without that role, without that risk, there might never have been a Kung Fu Hustle or a Shaolin Soccer. It all began with a supporting character who turned nonsense into art. #8. The Master of Lei Tau. Comedy. If you've ever tried to explain a Stephen Chow joke to someone who hasn't seen his movies, you know it's nearly impossible. His style of humor, famously known as Lei Tau, doesn't translate neatly into English. Literally, it means nonsense or makes no sense. But in practice, it's far more sophisticated. It's about delivering the unexpected, taking a scene in a completely absurd direction, breaking the rules of storytelling, and then somehow circling back to something deeply human. Here's an example. In one scene, a character might be in a life-or-death fight, but suddenly he pauses to make a ridiculous pun or breaks into an unrelated song or pulls out an object that has nothing to do with the story. It's chaotic, it's confusing, and it's hilarious. But here's the catch. Chow never used Lei Tau just to be silly. Beneath the nonsense, there was always a commentary about society, class, or the absurdities of human ambition. Take his early hit, Fight Back to School, 1991. On the surface, it's about an undercover cop who goes back to high school. Classic comedy setup, right? But Chow filled the movie with bizarre side plots, random tangents, and exaggerated characters. One moment he's fumbling through teenage slang, the next he's blowing up an exam hall in a parody of action films. Yet the film still resonated because it poked fun at authority, education, and the gap between appearances and reality. Hong Kong audiences loved it because they recognized themselves in the madness. Lei Tau became Chow's signature, much like slapstick was to Charlie Chaplin or improvisational mania was to Robin Williams. He transformed nonsense into an art form. And much like those American legends, Chow's humor traveled across borders. By the mid-1990s, he wasn't just a Hong Kong star. His films were huge in mainland China, Taiwan, Singapore, and even communities overseas. But what's fascinating is that Chow himself was incredibly methodical about crafting nonsense. Colleagues often described him as a perfectionist. On set, he would rehearse a single joke dozens of times, tweaking the timing, the angle, even the way a word was pronounced. It looked like chaos on screen, but it was controlled chaos. Think about Saturday Night Live sketches in the US. They might look spontaneous, but behind the scenes, every beat is rehearsed. Chow worked the same way, building nonsense with precision. American audiences sometimes compare Chow to Jim Carrey because both actors bend reality and exaggerate to absurd extremes. But while Carrey often focused on facial contortions and physical elasticity, Chow leaned into cultural absurdities, wordplay, and unexpected logic twists. For instance, in God of Cookery, 1996, he plays a celebrity chef who falls from grace. Instead of building the comeback story in a straightforward way, Chow throws in Shaolin monks teaching street food recipes, gangsters running noodle stalls, and cooking competitions that look like kung fu battles. It makes no sense, and yet it makes perfect sense in his comedic universe. That's the magic of Lei Tau. It gave audiences permission to laugh at the absurdities of life, especially in a city like Hong Kong where daily struggles often felt overwhelming. Comedy wasn't just entertainment. It was survival. #7. A reluctant superstar who avoids the spotlight. Here's a paradox. Stephen Chow is one of the most famous actors and directors in Asia, yet he's also one of the most reclusive. Unlike Hollywood celebrities who embrace red carpets and talk shows, Chow is notoriously private. He rarely gives interviews, almost never appears on variety shows, and avoids the glitzy social events of the entertainment world. In an industry built on self-promotion, this makes him a mystery. Fans often wonder, why so private? The answer lies in his personality. Remember, Chow grew up shy, the quiet kid in the classroom. That introversion never really went away. Even as he became a superstar, he preferred observing people rather than being observed. Colleagues have described him as intensely focused, even aloof at times. Some see him as eccentric, others as simply misunderstood. His reluctance also adds to his mystique. While Hollywood stars often burn out because they overexpose themselves, Chow has maintained an aura of unpredictability. You never quite know when he'll release a new film or what he's been working on. And when he does step back into the spotlight, the impact is seismic. For example, after a string of hits in the 1990s, Chow disappeared from acting for several years to focus on directing. Many fans worried he was done, but then in 2001 he returned with Shaolin Soccer. The film was a massive success, blending sports, kung fu, and absurd comedy in ways nobody had seen before. It was like a cultural earthquake. Imagine a director in Hollywood going silent for half a decade, only to return with a movie that breaks the box office records and creates an entirely new genre. That's what Chow did. His reclusive nature also influenced his reputation as a perfectionist. Because he wasn't distracted by fame's trappings, he poured everything into his work. On set, he was known to be demanding, sometimes to the point of being difficult. But the results spoke for themselves. His films consistently pushed boundaries, combining slapstick with cutting-edge special effects and heartfelt storytelling. There's also a cultural angle here. In Hong Kong and Chinese society, humility is often valued more than showmanship. By staying private, Chow reinforced the idea that the work should speak louder than the person. He wasn't chasing magazine covers or endorsement deals, he was chasing cinematic perfection. Interestingly, American audiences might compare him to directors like Stanley Kubrick, another perfectionist recluse. Kubrick made legendary films but avoided Hollywood parties. Chow followed a similar path, letting the mystery amplify the legend. In fact, his limited interviews often become collector's items among fans because he drops rare gems of insight into his creative process. This reluctance has also fueled endless speculation. Tabloids often try to fill the silence with rumors about his personal life, relationships, or eccentric habits. But the truth is, nobody really knows. And perhaps that's exactly how Chow wants it. By keeping his private life sealed off, he ensures that fans focus on his art, not his gossip. And yet, despite his avoidance of the spotlight, Chow remains a beloved figure. His films continue to dominate streaming platforms. His influence is studied in film schools, and younger comedians constantly cite him as an inspiration. The paradox is complete. The less we see of him, the more we crave his work. 6. Reinventing Kung Fu for a New Generation. When most people hear the words Kung Fu movie, they picture Bruce Lee's lightning-fast kicks or Jackie Chan's death-defying stunts. But Stephen Chow did something no one had tried before. He turned Kung Fu into comedy, and in doing so he redefined the genre for a new generation. In 2004, Chow released Kung Fu Hustle, and it wasn't just another martial arts film. It was a revolution. Imagine a world where gangsters dressed like 1940s mobsters battle kung fu masters hidden in a rundown apartment block, where a screaming landlady chases crooks barefoot with a cigarette dangling from her lips, and where a single fight scene could escalate into a surreal ballet of cartoon physics. It was part Looney Tunes, part Shaw Brothers, part Broadway musical, and it worked. The film was a global hit, earning more than $100 million worldwide, which at the time was unheard of for a Chinese-language comedy. American audiences, who had mostly been exposed to kung fu through serious dramas or action flicks, suddenly saw it in a whole new light. It was as if someone had mashed up The Matrix, Bugs Bunny, and classic martial arts all into one outrageous package. But here's what made it special. Beneath the absurdity, Chow still delivered heart. The main character, Sing, is a wannabe gangster who dreams of power but ultimately discovers his destiny as a true kung fu hero. It's the underdog story again, echoing Chow's own journey. Viewers weren't just laughing at the gags. They were rooting for Sing because he represented every ordinary person who secretly dreams of greatness. Chow's reinvention of kung fu also pushed technical boundaries. He embraced CGI effects in ways few Hong Kong directors had attempted at the time. Critics often note that his use of visual effects wasn't just flashy, it was integrated into the comedy. When a villain punches someone so hard they leave a crater in the ground, the over-the-top effect makes the scene funnier, not just more violent. Think about the American equivalent. When The Matrix, 1999, introduced bullet time, it changed Hollywood action forever. Kung Fu Hustle did something similar for martial arts comedy, inspiring a new wave of filmmakers across Asia and even influencing Western directors. Quentin Tarantino has repeatedly praised the film, and it's not hard to see echoes of Chow's style in Hollywood's later attempts at blending humor with stylized action. The success of Kung Fu Hustle proved that Kung Fu didn't have to be locked in the past, bound by tradition. It could be wild, ridiculous, and universally entertaining. By reinventing the genre, Chow made Kung Fu accessible to audiences who might never have sat through a serious martial arts epic. He gave them laughter with their punches, absurdity with their philosophy, and spectacle with their heart. 5. Shaolin Soccer, the sports film nobody saw coming. If Kung Fu Hustle reinvented martial arts, then Shaolin Soccer, 2001, reinvented sports movies. Before this film, soccer films were usually straightforward underdog stories. Teams train, face obstacles, and win the big game. Stephen Chow looked at that formula and thought, what if we turned soccer into Kung Fu? The result was one of the most original sports comedies ever made. The premise is delightfully absurd. A washed-up soccer player teams up with a group of former Shaolin monks who use their kung fu skills to play the ultimate game of soccer. Picture players doing bicycle kicks that launch the ball like a missile, goalkeepers leaping like superheroes, and defenders breaking the laws of physics to stop shots. It's part sports, part kung fu, part video game. And audiences loved it. The film was a monster hit in Asia, smashing box office records and becoming one of Hong Kong's highest-grossing films of all time. But what's really remarkable is how it traveled. American distributor Miramax picked up the film, dubbed and re-edited it, and released it to U.S. audiences. Despite the edits, it still became a cult favorite. For many Americans, Shaolin Soccer was their first introduction to Stephen Chow, and it was unforgettable. The movie's appeal went beyond flashy effects. At its core, it was still a story about underdogs chasing impossible dreams. The monks had all fallen on hard times, their lives reduced to mediocrity after their temple days. Through soccer, they found redemption and rediscovered their brotherhood. That emotional heart made the outrageous comedy land even harder. You weren't just laughing at a flaming soccer ball, you cared whether these characters won. Chow also used the film to critique modern society. The villains, for example, represent greed and corruption in sports, funded by shady corporations and obsessed with money rather than honor. By contrast, the Shaolin team symbolizes discipline, humility, and teamwork. It's a clash of values, disguised as a clash on the soccer field. For American audiences, the film felt like a mashup of genres they already loved: the sports underdog story, the superhero fantasy, and the absurdist comedy. Imagine if Dodgeball, The Avengers, and Enter the Dragon had a cinematic baby. That's Shaolin Soccer. The film's legacy is massive. It paved the way for Kung Fu Hustle, proving that audiences worldwide were ready for Chow's brand of comedy. It also influenced countless parodies, commercials, and even video games. To this day, if you Google Shaolin Soccer, you'll find fans recreating its impossible moves on YouTube. But perhaps the most important legacy is that it showed the world Stephen Chow wasn't just a Hong Kong star. He was an international filmmaker capable of crossing cultural boundaries. Shaolin Soccer wasn't just a sports comedy. It was a passport that carried Chow from Asia to Hollywood screens, expanding his reach far beyond what anyone expected. Hash 4. The Perfectionist Director. Behind the camera. By the time Stephen Chow transitioned from actor to full-fledged director, he had already proven himself a box office powerhouse. But what many fans don't realize is just how obsessive he is about directing. Colleagues often describe him as a perfectionist, someone who will shoot a single scene over and over, sometimes dozens of times, until every beat of the joke lands exactly the way he envisioned. On the surface, his movies look like spontaneous chaos, characters shouting nonsense, surreal visual gags, slapstick timing that feels unpredictable. But behind the camera, Chow runs his sets with almost mathematical precision. Crew members have recalled that he will adjust the angle of a shot by mere inches, or demand that an actor repeat a facial expression until it's perfect. To outsiders, this can look exhausting, even unreasonable. But it's the reason his films achieve such a unique blend of chaos and control. Think about how American directors like Stanley Kubrick or David Fincher are known for their obsessive takes. Kubrick famously shot Shelley Duvall's scenes in The Shining more than 100 times. Fincher is notorious for grinding actors through 50 takes of a single moment. Chow belongs to that club, but with comedy. And comedy is arguably harder. Timing is everything. 1 second too long, the joke dies. 1 second too short, the audience misses it. Chow knows this, and he won't settle until it feels perfect. This perfectionism also extends to post-production. For Kung Fu Hustle, he worked closely with special effects teams, demanding innovations that would make the visual gags land harder. Remember the scene where a character runs at super speed, his legs spinning like a cartoon? Chow spent weeks with animators fine-tuning the movement so it felt both ridiculous and believable. That obsessive attention to detail turned what could have been cheap slapstick into comedy gold. Yet, here's the irony. Even though he's a control freak on set, Chow rarely explains his creative process in interviews. He lets the films speak for themselves. Fans are left to interpret the artistry without a manual. In that sense, he's closer to someone like Christopher Nolan, who avoids over-explaining his films, trusting audiences to draw their own meaning. The results speak volumes. His perfectionism has earned him international recognition, including awards from film festivals around the world. And while some actors have admitted working with him can be stressful, almost all agree the final product is worth it. When you walk out of a Stephen Chow movie, you're not just laughing at random nonsense. You're witnessing the result of surgical comedic engineering. 3. Global influence from Hong Kong to Hollywood and beyond. It's one thing to dominate box offices in your home country. It's another to reshape global comedy. Stephen Chow did both. His influence isn't limited to Hong Kong or even Asia. His fingerprints can be seen all over international cinema, from Hollywood blockbusters to indie films. When Shaolin Soccer and Kung Fu Hustle made waves overseas, American critics were stunned. They weren't used to seeing a foreign-language comedy crack mainstream markets. Roger Ebert, the legendary U.S. film critic, praised Kung Fu Hustle as like Jackie Chan and Buster Keaton meet Quentin Tarantino. That's high praise, considering those are giants of cinema. Hollywood took notice. Studios started importing more Asian comedies, hoping to capture the same magic. While not all succeeded, the attempt itself showed how much Chow had shifted perceptions. Comedy was no longer seen as culturally locked. If a Cantonese-language film could make an American audience laugh until their sides hurt, then comedy truly was universal. His style also influenced filmmakers directly. Edgar Wright, director of Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, has cited Stephen Chow as a major influence. You can see it in Wright's use of sudden visual gags, over-the-top sound effects, and absurd transitions that break narrative rules. Quentin Tarantino, known for his eclectic taste, has championed Chow's films, often recommending Kung Fu Hustle as a must-watch. Even the Wachowskis, creators of The Matrix, acknowledged how Hong Kong cinema, including Chow's work, shaped their action comedy sensibilities. Beyond Hollywood, Chow's influence is even more profound. In mainland China, he's regarded almost as a cultural treasure. New generations of filmmakers have grown up idolizing him, trying to replicate his blend of nonsense humor and heartfelt storytelling. In South Korea and Japan, his films inspired parodies, TV sketches, and even manga references. And among diaspora communities worldwide, watching a Stephen Chow movie became a shared cultural experience, a way of connecting to home while laughing at the absurdity of life. One reason for his global influence is accessibility. Unlike some local comedies that rely heavily on wordplay, Chow always balanced his Cantonese puns with universal physical gags and exaggerated scenarios. You don't need to understand every cultural nuance to laugh at a soccer ball turning into a flaming comet or a kung fu master hiding as a poor landlord. Humor, when exaggerated enough, crosses borders. To put it in perspective for American audiences, Stephen Chow did for Hong Kong comedy what The Simpsons did for American satire. He created a comedic language that traveled everywhere, shaping how future creators approached humor. And just like The Simpsons' influence can be traced across decades of American television, Chow's DNA can be spotted in films and shows across Asia and the West. Today, streaming platforms have introduced his classics to new audiences. A teenager in California can stumble upon Shaolin Soccer on Netflix, while a film student in London can analyze Kung Fu Hustle frame by frame. The cycle of influence continues, ensuring Chow's impact will outlive the man himself. 2. The man who turned comedy into philosophy. Comedy is often dismissed as lightweight, funny but not profound. Stephen Chow shattered that stereotype by turning his films into vehicles for philosophy. Hidden beneath the slapstick, the nonsense, and the surreal exaggerations are surprisingly deep messages about life, ambition, and morality. Take Kung Fu Hustle. On the surface, it's a cartoonish martial arts romp, but look deeper, and it's a meditation on destiny. The main character, Sing, fails repeatedly until he accepts who he is and embraces his calling. It's the idea that greatness isn't about forcing yourself into a role you don't fit, but about discovering your true path. Or look at God of Cookery. It's not just a food parody, it's a story about arrogance, downfall, humility, and redemption. Beneath the absurd Shaolin recipes and over-the-top cooking battles lies a simple truth. Success built on ego is fragile, but success built on authenticity lasts. Chow weaves these lessons subtly. He never preaches. Instead, he lets comedy deliver the wisdom. When you're laughing so hard that you forget to breathe, your guard is down, and that's when the message slips in. It's like a Trojan horse of philosophy hidden inside a joke. In fact, some scholars have compared his approach to classic American comedians like Charlie Chaplin. Chaplin's Modern Times and The Great Dictator were hilarious but also deeply political. Chow operates in a similar tradition. His nonsense isn't just for laughs, it's for reflection. For Hong Kong audiences especially, his films often mirrored social realities. The underdog characters struggling against corrupt elites resonated in a city where inequality was widening. Even his silliest comedies contained critiques of greed, authority, and blind ambition. He made audiences laugh at problems that were often too painful to confront directly. American viewers can relate, too. Think of how shows like The Simpsons or films like Office Space use comedy to expose the absurdities of modern life. Chow is doing the same thing, just with kung fu kicks and flaming soccer balls. His humor entertains, but it also lingers. You walk away laughing, but also thinking. That's why so many fans call his work timeless. Jokes may age, references may fade, but the core truths about humility, perseverance, and humanity remain. In that sense, Chow isn't just a comedian. He's a philosopher who uses laughter as his language. #1. The Legacy of a Reluctant Legend. Here's the ultimate fact about Stephen Chow. His legacy isn't just about box office numbers or awards. It's about how deeply he has shaped the way people laugh, dream, and see themselves. He took a childhood of poverty and shyness and transformed it into stories that uplift the underdog. He took nonsense and turned it into art. He took kung fu, one of the most traditional genres in Chinese cinema, and reimagined it for the entire world. What makes his legacy even more striking is how reluctant he is about it. He doesn't chase fame, doesn't court publicity, doesn't bask in the spotlight. He lets the films do the talking. And yet, precisely because of that, his impact feels even more authentic. He isn't selling himself. He's sharing his vision. Generations of filmmakers cite him as an influence. Fans across Asia treat his lines as cultural catchphrases. Film students dissect his timing like scientists. Even Hollywood giants tip their hats to his genius. That's the mark of a legend, when your work becomes bigger than you. But perhaps his most enduring legacy is hope. In a world where comedy often feels shallow, Stephen Chow proved that it can be profound. He showed that laughter doesn't just distract from life's struggles, it can transform them. He reminded us that the poorest kid in the room might one day make the whole world laugh. And he demonstrated that. Nonsense, when crafted with love and vision, can reveal truths no serious speech ever could. Stephen Chow's journey from a shy boy in Hong Kong to the king of comedy is more than entertainment. It's inspiration. It tells us that greatness isn't reserved for the loudest or the richest. It belongs to those who persist, who innovate, who dare to dream nonsense into reality. And there you have it, the top 10 facts about Stephen Chow, the man who turned nonsense into genius and comedy into a philosophy of life. From poverty to global fame, from Lei Tau to Kung Fu Hustle, his story is a reminder that laughter is universal, and that even the most absurd dreams can change the world. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your friends who love movies as much as you do. And of course, subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more fascinating stories about the people who shaped our culture. Until next time, keep laughing, keep dreaming, and keep believing in the power of nonsense.